Hey Alan, how you doing? Alan, can you hear me okay? I think you're on mute there now actually at the moment.
I am indeed. I can hear you fine.
Yeah, very good. Hey, thanks very much for coming on today.
Not at all. A pleasure, Brian.
That's great. We'll be digging into our experiences. We're not going to massacre the masses with PowerPoint presentations, I'm afraid. I
That
have a few,
be fun.
but I suppose from my point of view, I'm just going to talk about funding, applications, what's out there, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience with Tin on the R&D side. From your perspective, what does the world of funding mean for you and R&D in particular, especially if you have a small unit in the team? Like we just came out of a series of workshops that emphasised from Enterprise Ireland they want to see the makeup of the team. They want to see a techie, they want to see management, and they want to see sales. And as this correlates to your experience, that would be great. And from then there, I'd say we'll have just a general chat. We're going to be joined by Joe Borza, who he works in, I don't know if you know Joe, but he works in the whole area of the HPSU competitive startup programs. I think he's been in and out of startups himself. So we'll have plenty to talk about, that's for sure. I think the average attendee for the workshop, it's just a jam-packed agenda. I think it just fluctuates. You'd be lucky to get between anything from 15 to 20 attending the workshop. So I'd imagine a cohort of 300 is not going to happen. So that's the story.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, look, I can just speak about our own experiences. I'll speak actually about my personal experiences from when I left the corporate world to entering the startup world, and how we leveraged relationships with Enterprise Ireland and indeed Nimbus to help us
Great.
succeed.
That'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. How are you getting on work from home, Alan? I see you have a busy agenda behind you, that's for sure.
I do. It's actually fine. It is.
Great.
It's fine. I'm pretty disciplined.
Yes.
And I think that helps. But you do tend to end up working a bit more, I think.
Yeah, that's it. The day is unorthodox to the extreme, and depending on your family circumstances, it can get very complicated. Like we've got ill people in the family, very elderly people at one side, tots at the other, and in between is work. And I suppose my wife works as well, and she's just started teaching as of today. She was on sabbatical leave for all of this year or last year, which was really handy. But I suppose the youngest we have now on is 3 and the oldest is 13. So we're out at the nappies, thank God. That's serious stuff. That's serious stuff.
It's busy. It's busy. But look, it has to be done. But the sleepless nights don't help much, and plus a lot of my Brandon included are in the US.
Yes.
So they're over on the other side as well. So their day starts when I'm finishing up, which means I'm not finishing up.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. They have a very ad hoc day, that's for sure. But anyway, we'll probably look back at this era in years to come as saying, geez, we had some level of quality family time anyway during that period.
You know what? There's a lot said for it. I don't think. I mean, I have an 8-month-old at the moment, and there's a lot of time that I don't think I would have got with him.
Of course.
For this, and it's there's always a silver lining.
Well, those are the best years, those impressionable years. I think for our first, I was between jobs and I was finishing off a master's, I think, at the time. And I just decided I would take the first 8 months off this person's life. So it was just myself, and my wife was on maternity leave. And Jesus, it was great. It was really good.
Yeah.
And benefited her as well, I'm sure, my daughter. But No, it was really, and obviously there was sleep deprivation during that period as well. It was good to have two on the case that could recover.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is done and dusted now. Thanks be to God. And it's this moment of madness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, the startup then, Alan, like tin is just one little piece of your portfolio, isn't it? You're obviously involved in other companies. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. So, I mean, Stracos is the primary company I'm involved with, and I'll talk a little bit to
yeah, too.
Well,
yeah.
And we have a few spin-off companies. Tin is one of those. Line Simulator, the game that we developed.
Yeah, that's great.
It's another.
That's great.
It's hilarious.
One of the more interesting visits I took, I visit loads of companies here in Ireland all the time. I suppose when you're in the gateway in Nimbus, the international travel is out. It doesn't really encourage international portfolio projects, but Blizzard Entertainment are based in Cork City, and it was just so interesting visiting them. A lot of the workforce have Asperger's, ADHD, an amazing array. The head of HR there was telling me, there isn't a day where she has to bring one of the staff to the local doctor, for stuff. But they are so talented. And it's all design, it's all artwork, and the way the whole open plan office is arranged, there's a special area for yoga, and the whole thing is geared to accommodate their disabilities in some way, to get the most out of them, I suppose, because it is American companies. I find American companies usually have a good knack of actually getting the most out of you, but this was really good, and it's what a successful company as well at the same time.
Oh, it is extraordinary. I think it's funny with the gaming community, let's say, and the developers we have that are working on Line Simulator.
Yes.
It's herding cats in a lot of ways, because the personalities are just so very different from your traditional company.
Yeah, exactly.
But exactly. Extraordinarily rewarding as well, because if you
guys, I'm just going to let everybody in there.
Okay, Robert. Okay.
It's time there.
I never introduced you to Robert, actually, Alan.
Okay.
Hi, Robert.
I'm behind the curtain. Nice to meet you, Alan.
And you too. And you too. I'll be singing your praises.
Okie
Oh, wow, we got a large cohort here. That's great. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining this particular session. It would be great if we can have more interaction from the audience now today. So we're really encouraging you to ask questions as much as you can, raise your hands. We're all very friendly people here, so there should be zero intimidation. And what we're doing is we're joined by Mr. Alan Gormley, who's involved in a number of companies, but one he's going to talk about heavily is a gaming company called Tin. I'm representing the Nimbus Research Center. Surprise. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience in chasing research funding and adding value to innovations that come through our door. There's a number of other colleagues in the chat room here as well. They're very much part of that process, but I'll leave you guys alone rather than pulling you in on the hop. So again, we talk about startup funding a little bit. We've just come out of 2 workshops that really emphasize the whole area of the startup world. But we're also joined as well by Joe Borza. Joe is obviously involved with Enterprise Ireland and has a big emphasis on what's involved in the competitive startup and high performance startup worlds. So I suppose I'll just start off by saying that we're not going to kill everyone with PowerPoint presentations today, absolutely not. But I will actually talk a little bit about or represent our various experiences. So if I go first, then I would just say that my remit within the Nimbus Gateway side of the Nimbus Research Center is to essentially assist companies to, let's say, leverage appropriate R&D funding from available programs. I do not assist companies to go out and pitch against investors. I can drop kick that can next door to the Rubicon Center, but essentially we're an R&D unit within the Munster Technological University, and we have a big passion on doing multiple projects from a wide variety of different areas. This can be quite a stressful job. It certainly can involve a lot of burnout for large cohorts of our workforce, simply because our budgets are quite tight. Our time is quite tight also. But we seem to be able to get our customers onto the next level of their product development, which they can go to the door. So I suppose, where do people start when they come in the door with us? We all start with non-disclosure agreements, you'll be delighted to know. This is definitely the first hurdle and adds confidence to the conversation. So from when that is in place, we will then sit down and talk about their actual idea and innovation. We will have an enormous amount of ideas to add value to that innovation based on the array of projects we've been involved in since we've all joined the Nimbus Gateway. On average, we deliver about maybe 70 projects a year. Enterprise Ireland projects, probably 60. We deliver possibly maybe just under 2 million in projects. I would say on average for Enterprise Ireland, give or take 12 to 18 months, every 18 months, probably tots up to that value. Now, we supplement our existence and keep the wolves from the door in Nimbus by participating in numerous research programs across the EU. And from that experience, the model for research programs requires industry involvement. And from that, there's many corridors of funding in Brussels that SMEs in Ireland should really investigate and find out more from. So essentially, we're pretty good at trying to leverage funding from those pools. But the main low-hanging fruit for us are certainly, the place to start is the innovation voucher. I don't know if can anyone show hands on in the participants list if you've actually leveraged a PhD or leveraged a innovation voucher in the last couple of years. I'm not too sure if we can actually. Okay, great, Martina, that's great. So it's a very straightforward process, Martina, as you know, and essentially it takes us about 10 minutes to actually put in an innovation voucher. I suppose since I joined Nimbus, the onus was on the client to actually do all the applications. But since I came on the scene, we've actually taken up that responsibility. We'll do all the applications for the client. It just most of our clients generate a rash if they hear the word application. So we'll ease the blow, and we'll work with them closely to submit an application. For innovation vouchers, what they don't do is market research or develop a website or develop an app. What they will do is they will actually allow us to actually design a specific piece of software, maybe make a start on some of the subsystems of the proposed platform. If it's a hardware project, we might do enough in the first voucher to actually see what's required for PCB development or system integration development, what off-the-shelf components we need to actually glue together to actually realize a working prototype. 90% or 99% of the time we develop prototypes. Now, everyone here is familiar with technology readiness levels. I would say 90% of the time we deliver up to technology readiness level 4, which is basically a proof of concept or prototype that has been lab tested and sent back to the customer. as everyone understands, innovation vouchers, every company is entitled to 2 standard €5,000 vouchers and 1 co-funded. So for those who are not familiar with co-funded vouchers, it means that industry or the applicant makes a contribution up to a maximum of 5,000 to leverage the same quantity of cash back from Enterprise Ireland. Now, if you're big enough and you can take the hit, instead of actually going for 2 standard vouchers, you can actually apply for 2 co-funded vouchers. So there's 2 options: 2 standard and 1 co-funded, or 3 co-funded innovation vouchers. So we have a very strong and very positive relationship with the Innovation Voucher Program Director and his colleagues in Dublin. And if there's any issues like a rejected application, we can get those reconsidered. There is a process to reconsider a failed application. Now, why do applications fail or get rejected? 9 times out of 10, it's got to do with the fact that there's an active innovation voucher already in place from that applicant, and essentially for that program to work, there needs to be a completed innovation voucher off the system in Enterprise Ireland before the applicant can actually apply for a second voucher. From voucher funding, we would then progress to what we use a lot is the Innovation Partnership Program. Now, this has a really nice up to a €9,000 grant for feasibility studies, and we use this an awful lot again to map the road to an even bigger project development. Plus, we might do a minor market exercise, research exercise on some of the components that we might need in the innovation. Following on the feasibility, which takes anything from 3 months to 6 months, we will actually venture into either an express or full innovation partnership application. So this will allow businesses to leverage anything up to 85,000 for an express, or about 150,000 for a full innovation partnership program R&D grant. Now, the caveat here is there's a 20% expected contribution by the client. Now, this 20%, depending on how much you leverage, can be quite manageable or quite troublesome. But treat, and I always say this, and my colleagues are sick of me saying this, treat dealing with the MTU like dealing with a credit union. Everything is negotiable. We can actually pay that 20% back over the duration of that R&D project. So if you're going in for anything up to about €80,000, you're probably talking about anything from 6 to 12 months duration. So things can be worked out in that fashion, and that's the way we do it. Following on from that, then we can actually entertain direct funded projects. And one thing that I hope most companies are aware of is that, again, takes the sting out of the cost of R&D is the 25% R&D tax credit. Okay, so for a co-funded innovation voucher, if you're putting in 5,000, the net is probably something going to be about maybe 3,500 maybe. As such, so it's all very well doable, and Ireland has been a fantastic country as a test bed for products, but also as an area to support small companies. I suppose I'll come back to more experiences maybe later, but just to take my mundane accent out of this presentation, I might just invite Alan Gormley in now. Alan, you might talk a little bit about your experience in the bad world, the bad commercial world out there.
Sure. I think I've just as flat an accent though, Brian, unfortunately. I'm coming from the west of Ireland originally.
It's not as flat as that Kilkenny accent anyway, that's for sure.
Well, look, first of all, thanks for having me on. I think I had a chance to look at some of the other presentations earlier today, and it's really an excellent conference. So yeah, look, I mean, I can speak to my own personal experience, certainly. probably the best place to start is where I came from. And I mean, the reason I say that is it's probably the antithesis of a startup career. I spent most of my earlier career in an organization called GS1, a standards organization, which, look, by necessity, are very slow to change. For those of you who don't know who GS1 are, they're the guys responsible for every barcode you see in a supermarket shelf, and UDI numbers. So UDIs are unique device identifiers that are assigned to medical devices. But look, long story short, I suppose that's where my entrepreneurial spirit was first fostered, in the sense that traditionally these barcode numbers that everyone is familiar with and everyone sees every day were managed by individual companies, about, I think, maybe 50 million companies worldwide, on Excel sheets. And I thought there was probably a better way to do that. So I developed a small software application that allowed member companies of GS1, small mom and pop stores, to companies like Unilever, to log in, allocate a number to their product, associate master data with that product, and then they could share that product information with their customers and e-commerce sites, for example. Now, I think the only way that was possible, well, to deliver it in such a short time frame, it was about 6 months, was the fact I had over 90 different GS1 offices around the world, thousands of people with expertise I could leverage, and quite frankly, the resources needed to deliver it. Doing something similar with a startup is a very different proposition, and that's kind of where I found myself next. And actually, ironically enough, it was Enterprise Ireland who introduced me to that startup I started with, initially, a company called SteriTrack. And essentially, in a nutshell, they were leveraging, or we were leveraging, a requirement that was set forth in a new regulation requiring all medical devices had to be marked with this unique product identifier. And it was being used to track medical devices or medical implants to the patient to, ensure product recalls were more effective, etc. So look, without going into too much detail, one of the main challenges for manufacturers, beyond the fact they didn't want to do it for the most part, and that's an entirely different story, and a story for another day, was that while the technology to laser mark these devices was relatively mature, the technology needed to read them wasn't. So to give you an indication of the size of barcode we're talking on some of these medical devices, if you consider a barcode on a normal product, it contains 13 digits. Now imagine trying to laser etch a barcode onto an aneurysm clip the size of a paper clip, that might have 25 or 30 digits in it. It's a much different proposition. Long story short, we developed a prototype scanner that was able to do this, but it was expensive. It relied on third-party hardware, and to be honest, we felt we could build a solution ourselves that would be a lot better, for a few reasons. Look, the dependency from third parties would be removed. Cost, we knew we could build it cheaper, or we assumed we could build it cheaper. And we wanted to introduce some machine learning and decode algorithms that would mean the scanner would be improved simply by using the device. Something that's critically important when you consider where the scanner was going to be used, in a high pressure, surgical environment. And you don't want a surgeon running to the fruit and veg aisle looking for a barcode that works. You want it to work there and then every time. So look, knowing what we needed to do and needed to achieve, we knew we needed help to do that. And I mean, the first place, not the first place, but the first place we got real help was from Enterprise Ireland. And I'm not going to explain how the process has evolved. You and Joe are much better placed to do that than I. But what I will say is the following. What we achieved simply wouldn't have been possible in the time frame and budget we had without, well, your help and Enterprise Ireland. Enterprise Ireland provided us with a lot of advice on what funding was available, what supports were right for us based on where we were as a company, and a lot of the softer sort of skills and resources like access to market research, business intelligence, and broader insights into commercialization and things like that. Of course, one of the things we're very grateful for is being introduced to Richard Linger and the whole team at Nimbus. What I particularly liked about working with Nimbus, I suppose, was the methodical approach that was taken to the development of the hardware and the software we needed. And yeah, look, ultimately what it resulted in was us building a machine learning scanning engine capable of scanning a code less than a third of a millimeter in size, something that the entire industry told us that wasn't possible, which, yeah, we're very grateful for. I mean, my time in SteriTrack came to a natural end then, and I decided to move or join Stracos, a company Brandon Donnelly, who's speaking today as well, established. Where do I start with Stracos? Look, our elevator pitch is we offer a magical experience, clever solutions, delivered crazy fast, designed just for you. But I suppose most relevant today, and you've mentioned Tin already, is our experience in the gaming industry to date. And I guess, how did we end up in gaming? Really, it was a consequence of the culture we tried to develop within the organization. And the reason I'm talking about it, the culture, as well as it's a path that led us back to Enterprise Ireland and Nimbus again. But look, we wanted our developers in particular to enjoy what they were doing and to have fun. So we asked them, what would you like to do in your spare time, or when we have an hour or 2 hours or a day a week spare? And essentially they said, look, we'd like to develop a VR game. So we said, okay, what will we do? And look, I believe there's a free copy for all of the participants in the conference as well. So I suggest you all download it. If you have a VR set, it's a wacky, surreal experience that takes you from queues in a supermarket to an airport into otherworldly theme parks where you spike drinks and have cake fights. And look, even with that, you have no idea what you're in for. So go and have some fun with it. But during our journey to develop this game, and the research we were, superficial research we were doing on the games industry generally, something came up again and again, and it was the amount of negative and toxic sentiment that exists in gaming. So what do I mean by that? Well, look, the game industry increasingly relies on live services where players interact with one another. And it's really evident that bullying, harassment, and even hate group recruitment is rampant. And it's costing the gaming industry about 8 billion a year. Why? Because players simply move to another game, and this means that the opportunity to earn from microtransactions and things like that within a game is removed from those companies. So we said, you know what, let's try to do something about that. And we spun up another startup called TIN, TIHN. The solution is at a basic level a speaker recognition and speech text conversion API that recognizes toxic behavior within a game and helps gaming companies act appropriately. In some respects, I would say game companies are kind of ill-equipped to tackle these sort of problems and disinterested in creating solutions, but they do want to solve it. $8 billion, of course they want to solve it, but they'd rather pay for a solution than develop it themselves. So we do, well, I say developed, we are developing an API that game developers can integrate into their game, and it establishes, let's say, acceptable behavioral baselines, and game companies control those levels of tolerance, rewarding players for social interactions, for positive social interactions, and creating a system of negative reinforcement for toxic players. Now, the system is going to have a dynamically adjusting recursive feedback system to create micro adjustments to normalize player vernacular, etc. But simple as it sounds, if it does sound simple, is saying I'll kill you in a game is not necessarily a negative interaction in a shoot 'em up, right? So we ended up, and this sounds like an advertisement for you guys at Nimbus, but gravitating back to Nimbus to help us build those contextualized models for us based on the experience we already had with both yourselves and Enterprise Ireland. So look, we're a small organization, I think, with big ideas. If I was to give anyone any advice on the call, in terms of funding, research, and innovation, it would be simply to pick up the phone and have a conversation, because that's where it all started with us. And the technical support, the end-to-end support on some of the solutions that we're developing, because they're complex, solutions architecturally and conceptually. But we found that on the softer side with Enterprise Ireland and the business side of things, the support has been second to none. And then technically, I mean, I can't sing Nimbus's praises enough. And I know there's a lot of organizations around Ireland that do that, or do similar type of things, but it's been a learning experience, and we've grown as an organization because of the interaction as well.
No, that's great, Alan. I know when you're talking there, like, my first introduction to gaming industry was the CeBIT exhibition in Hanover in 1997.
Nice.
Would you believe I was a Taiwanese correspondent for a magazine called Nikkei Electronics Asia, and it was a part-time job because I worked with Acer Computers at the time in Taipei, and essentially we were sent over, and I did an article on the gaming industry, and it was 378 Taiwanese gaming companies at that fair in '97. So
Wow.
you can imagine how much of a dynamic world the gaming industry is. And I think the core service behind Tin is actually really interesting. And again, another little anecdote that comes to mind is I think last year my 5-year-old came in crying into the room that his older sister had destroyed his virtual world in Minecraft with lava. And he was in an awful state. So whether that that defines a toxic player from his sister's point of view, that's another question. But I want to actually bring in Joe Borza here now. Joe, what is the perception of gaming companies in Enterprise Ireland? Are they a dodgy entity to back, or are they something that's really exciting and you're grabbing the bull by both horns by supporting them to the nth degree?
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Alan. I suppose the thing for gaming companies would be that it can be very difficult to demonstrate innovation in a gaming company, because the majority of gaming companies, initially it's about how do we market this product to the consumer. And generally speaking, for those kind of companies, it usually involves a lot of spend on marketing. And generally speaking, from a HPSU point of view, we're looking for the fund to be the funding to really be going towards the innovation aspects of the business, and that can be hard. Now, at an early stage, there could be some innovative technology within the gaming application and the company looking for the funding. So as Alan was saying there are particular niches within gaming which will be very, very innovative and in very large markets. But I suppose if you're just developing a Flappy Birds app for the iPhone and you're just trying to get funding to market it and put on ads out there so everyone can see where this game is and download it, it can be very difficult for us to support that, because it's the innovation side of things can be difficult, and also it could be a race to whoever has the biggest amount of funding raised will be the winner in those type of scenarios, because it's a numbers game at that point. But no, I mean, outside of that though, I mean, anything that's innovative, we'd always recommend, like the kind of pathway would be to talk to the LEO, local enterprise office. If it's very much export focused and there's a very big growth opportunity, that the LEO should nearly refer you into Enterprise Ireland, or you can approach HPSU directly from that point of view. But no, it's not, I wouldn't say it's been tarnished in any way as a sector, but it is one of those ones where it can be very difficult to prove that there's a model there. I mean, there's well-known examples of millions been spent developing games that just don't take off, and vice versa, games that have spent practically nothing and have turned into absolute megastorm successes, essentially, from that point of view.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'll just open it to the floor now to see if there's any questions being posed there. If anyone has a question they'd like to pose, please jump right in and raise your hands. That's what this workshop is all about. But I must say, it's really exciting for us in Nimbus to get a project in the gamification area. There's actually so much emphasis now on data analytics and data analytical projects, and also the user experience design in the front end of the product. That's actually really interesting to us. There's a serious, let's say, heuristic knowledge required on let's say the behavior of the end user, and what part of that front end they're going to interact with. That's the most effective. Alan, obviously this is one particular product you have in mind. Does it ever cross your thought process that, okay, maybe this particular product could be useful in the banking sector or the fintech sector? Or do you just actually, since you're in this company, just say, right, we're focusing on one area and that's it? Doesn't matter how attractive other areas are. This is the way this company is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, you've actually kind of answered my question for me, Brian. We made a decision early on to be absolutely laser focused with the market we were going to target initially. And look, that's for very obvious reasons. I think you can get distracted very quickly. But in saying that, there's obviously a huge there's huge opportunities for the application of this type of technology to be used in numerous other applications. Everything from I know a company who's doing something similar in looking for libel in newspapers and print media at the moment, where they're not necessarily ingesting spoken word, but they're ingesting material from newspapers, etc., and using it as a way in which they can highlight if a journalist, for example, is possibly committing libel. And so the point I suppose I'm trying to make is there's huge application for this type of technology. We ourselves have focused on a particular industry for the moment. But look, if the last year has taught us anything, it's that we have to be flexible as well. As it happens, gaming is exploding because of COVID. So it seems to be the right way to go. But you can also see because schools, for example, are been well, I'm sure they'll reopen, but because it's all been done from home, this bullying, all of that sort of stuff happens unfortunately online as well. So build the models first, build the technology, and then perhaps we will apply it to different industries.
Great. But I know that like this session here focuses on research, innovation, and funding, and we can't actually leave this topic about discussing the murky world of intellectual property ownership. And it's something that always pops up with our startups in the door, and especially with some of the programs that we leverage funding from, such as, like, as everyone knows, the applicant for an innovation voucher will own any IP that's generated from that minuscule of budget. And it does happen from time to time that we do actually stumble upon a little piece of intellectual property, and that is actually owned 100% by the applicant. The college goes through a process of invention disclosure. It's signed off through a IP assignment process, and that comes back then into the company. But all other programs where you leverage cash from a funder, there's IP agreements that need to be entertained. Alan, how do you sit with IP agreements?
I have to admit, when we first started discussing them, there is a certain sense of protectionism that you naturally gravitate towards. But what I would say is this: we did put an IP agreement in place, and I think on balance, what we did, and we consider it a partnership with the work we've done with Nimbus. On balance, I think as a company, we got a lot more than we gave. I'll be perfectly honest with you. And the IP agreement that we did finally settle on, to me was, it was. I'm not going to go into details about it, but it was perfectly acceptable. And as I said, I think we benefited far more from the engagement than we gave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I'd like to invite Joe in now to talk about the same issue, really. Joe, like you're dealing with HPSUs all the time. They're obviously like IP seems to be the be all and end all to these companies. How do you tackle those questions with these people?
Yeah, I suppose it very much depends on the sector and the type of company. I mean, a lot of early stage software companies won't have any IP in the sense of formal patents or formal protections outside of maybe trademarks and things like that. So it really does depend on the company and what they're developing. Obviously, if it's in the medical technology space and it's had 10 years of academia, rigor, assessment, that's a different type of company. But for the most part, I think sometimes you find academically background founders almost get bogged down in the IP discussions because they see this vision of, $100 million company in the future.
Exactly,
And they sometimes get lost in the fact that to get to that kind of vision, there's a lot of hard work, etc., that needs to be done. So again, it's something that I think companies need to be aware of and take good consideration of and good advice on, but it shouldn't be a blocker to actually getting things done. So I mean, you've got the likes of Y Combinator, the accelerator program in the US, where they would say like the key thing is actually get things done. The IP side of things is something that, while it's important to know about, etc., the key thing is to show that there's good sense in the idea that you have and there's demand for what you're building as well. And I think, if you go down the route of, if depending on the startup, if the startup needs to have protections in place because the customer, or sorry, the value in the company is going to be acquired because of this piece of IP, then that needs to be carefully considered very early on. But for most startups, that's not really what they're planning on doing, etc. They're planning on building the business, growing the customer base, etc. And the IP is almost secondary in some instances anyway for those type of companies.
Yeah. Now, one scenario we're coming across an awful lot, especially for our bigger developments, is that a semi like a company that has maybe 150 plus staff come into us, and we agree on a project. We scope out a project and agree on the project. And we actually decide that maybe some of the SFI, Science Foundation Ireland centres have a good offer. It's generally a 50-50 split between funding and development. Some of our companies feel that all they have to do is just produce the 50% and they walk away into the horizon with the developed product. And they cannot understand how they would actually have to service licensing fees based on, let's say, IP that was generated during that project. So they've paid 50%, and then after it's been delivered, and if it's a success, they go on and they have to entertain licensing fees. So many find this a really difficult pill to swallow. To us, it makes sense from the funder's point of view. It's taxpayers' money we're dealing with at the end of the day, and there needs to be some form of return on investment. But it takes two to tango in these situations. And again, it's probably a difficult question I'm asking now, Alan. Again, is would you be falling on the side of it's a hard pill to swallow. The company has actually been very involved in the project. They've put in-kind hours in relation to their staff working with, let's say, for want of a better cohort, the Nimbus staff to develop the product, and to entertain licensing fees on the IP afterwards is just a step too far. How would you feel about that?
It's a difficult one to answer, I think. We're actually in the process of deciding which way. Well, we're in the process of deciding whether or not we're going to apply for an SFI grant at the moment. During the madness of COVID, we actually pivoted very early last year, and strangely enough, we became a commodities manufacturer as well. We've designed and developed and engineered sprayers, household sprayers, believe it or not, made from a recyclable polymer, and are set by June this year to be manufacturing one every second. So that's led us down the path to consider, building smart factory technology, and we're in discussions with SFI and yourselves at the moment. But the question is, would it be a hard pill to swallow? And personally, I don't believe it is. I mean, it is at the beginning, but the medicine is good, right? The expertise you're getting, and I know from personal experience the amount of work and expertise that you get from these engagements is worth it. What I would say to anyone considering it is simply go in there with your eyes open, and know exactly what it is that you're agreeing to. Make sure it's right for the company at that particular time, and if it's not, that's okay too. That's absolutely fine. But no, you get nothing for nothing, right? It's that simple, I think.
Okay. Well, look, I'll tell you, we'll get off this topic now. Just finally, just to wrap up, I have to say the most successful projects we're involved in is where there is an exploding passion from the client and love for the products that they're developing. And basically, everything goes out the window. Everything doesn't matter. All energy is on how fantastic that product is. And that's just basically plain evidence that we have on our more successful projects. I've often talked about to my colleagues, like if we do 100 projects in a year, I guarantee you 30 of those projects would be extremely challenging. And if you analyze those 30 even further, there'll be an issue with the client. The client is just not looking at the product at all, and is looking at, let's say, a potential windfall coming in some fine day, and it's a problem. Alan, you've probably seen this a lot, have you? This scenario.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, like, I suppose we're talking about passion, right? Like, yeah. Everything else goes out the window if that product is just your world, Like, you're developing thin at the moment. No one else has probably got that. You addressed it in your chat earlier in saying that you sat down with your staff and you said, look, guys, what would you most enjoy working on? Like, that is just so essential to ask staff. Like, I'm in charge of bringing in projects in Nimbus, and I always have to ask the staff, lads, what do you like working on? There's no point bringing in a dinosaur if you're actually going to hate. Yeah, and like, I'm sure you've recruited staff then that translates into recruitment. You're not going to recruit someone who's not passionate about it. So, I suppose, again, I'll go back to Joe maybe and say, Joe, like, successful companies, this is probably a secret ingredient, I would imagine.
Yeah, I suppose there's no one secret ingredient to any successful company, is what I've discovered. It tends to be a blend of things that tends to make these companies successful. So there wouldn't be one particular thing that you'd see them kind of having as a trait the whole way through. I think you're right. I mean, passion has to be there, because every startup will have really, really tough days and tough weeks and potentially tough years. And if you haven't got that resilience built in, you can really struggle as a company to succeed. And I suppose the other thing you might see in a lot of the kind of founders and founding teams and companies is everyone talks about unicorns, but every unicorn starts out as being, essentially like a cockroach that's, you know, really difficult to kill.
Yeah.
and it's got a, you know, really hard shell around it, and it just survives everything. And that's where, you know, every unicorn, I think, starts out in that mode, and then essentially grows into those other ones from that point of view. And then, yeah, I suppose just from a funding point of view, obviously Enterprise Ireland has a range of funding supports out there for innovation, and so do SFI. I suppose the Enterprise Ireland funding is very much geared towards the commercial and commercialization side of things, as opposed to, not saying it wouldn't fund deeper research, etc., but it is looking for companies that are ready or close to being ready to go to market. And then the only other funding stream that companies probably should look at is the European funding streams, because they are becoming more robust, very, very competitive, but, you know, very, very considerable and substantial when it comes to kind of funding innovation and research in particular.
Yeah.
Exactly. Excellent. Sorry, Alan, you wanted to say something there?
Well, no, I was just going to say that I agree with Robert that it isn't any one thing, but on your point around passion, yeah, look, it's absolutely critical, I think, and it does filter right down through the organization, particularly to recruitment, I would say, and it's something that we work very hard to ensure in our culture is to maintain passion within the organization. And that's why we have pet projects like developing virtual reality games and things like that. But the reality of being able to pursue passion as well, let's be honest, it's a luxury at times, and particularly in the context of, you know, the world we're living in today. I mean, I gave the example that we had to pivot from manufacturing games and AI to producing widgets, to secure another income stream. So if I was to give any advice to people attending, I would say be as flexible as you can in pursuing your passion project, but you have to realize that, you know, if you do have to pivot and work on the mundane for a while, the reason that you're doing that is that you can eventually refocus and get your energies, or refocus your energies back to your mission and your passion project eventually. So flexibility.
Yep, fantastic. I think thanks very much for your contribution today. That was great, and I think everyone who was listening probably will be. If I've addressed a number of questions in the chat, and I think you're armed with some a bit of homework to do, some of you guys. And if you have any further questions, just drop us a call in Nimbus, or drop Enterprise Ireland a call. And if you've any interest in TIN, I think Tinner, do they have a recruitment exercise in this workshop this time around? I think there's some recruitment going on in the gaming industry at this conference anyway at the moment. But, okay, guys, thanks very much, Alan. Thanks very much, Joe. And there's further workshops of a similar nature. The next one, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity as opposed to gaming. And that starts at 3:15. But anyway, thanks for everyone for attending, and especially Alan and Joe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, take care now.